For the next few weeks, we're going to be doing a little series in the run-up to Christmas that we're calling Incomparable, Incarnation. Now, they're two very big words, so let me break them both down for you, okay? First word, incomparable. Now, we know what it is to compare things. So, a turkey is a wee bit like a chicken. Santa is a wee bit like the Tooth Fairy. Charlie West is a wee bit like Lionel Messi. A wee bit. But we know what it is to compare things. When something, though, or someone is incomparable, we're saying that they are without equal, that there's nobody in the same league as them. That they're totally unique. Comparison is impossible. And the Bible says that God puts the in incomparable. I'm going to read you some verses. If you've got a Bible and you want to follow along, we're going to start off in Isaiah 40. But let me read you some verses from Isaiah 40, where God is describing himself as the one who is incomparable. So let me start at verse 12. God says, "Who's measured the waters in the hollow of his hand? Or with the breadth of his hand is marked off the heavens? Who's held the dust of the earth in a basket, or weighed the mountains on scales and the hills in a balance? Who can fathom the Spirit of the Lord? Who can instruct the Lord as his counselor? Who did the Lord consult to enlighten him, or who taught him the right way? Who was it that taught him knowledge, or showed him the path of understanding?" All those questions come back, and the answer is nobody. Look on to verse 18. The question is asked, "With whom then will you compare God? To what image will you liken him?" And the answer comes back, nobody. Look on to verse 25. "To whom will you compare me? Or who is my equal?" says the Holy One. "Lift up your eyes, look to the heavens. Who created all these? He who brings out the starry hosts one by one, calls forth each of them by name, because of his great power and mighty strength, not one of them is missing." What's the point? The God who created the universe himself looks around the universe to see if there is anything or anyone that can compare with him. And he finds nothing. You cannot put anything that is created into the same category as the Creator. He is incomparable. And if God is that big, and he is, that means that in many ways, in a significant sense, he is beyond us. If you like big words, the fact that he is incomparable makes him incomprehensible. Let me put it this way. Getting God in your head is like trying to fit all of the water on planet Earth into a shot glass. We don't have the capacity. Do you get the picture? Or trying to get the concept of God right in your head is like an ant trying to get the concept of the internet in its head. We just don't have the categories. Do you see the point? The bigness of God makes him beyond us. But where we struggle to understand God, thankfully, God perfectly understands us. There's a verse in one of the other Psalms that says, he remembers how we are formed. He knows that we are dust. He understands us perfectly. And so although he is so big that he is beyond us, the Creator has chosen to communicate to us in a way that creatures can compute. Think of it this way. Even though he's so big he's beyond us, he has made his bigness bite-size so that we can digest it. It's as if, let's try and put it this way, we can never totally know God, but we can truly know God. You see the difference between them two? We'll never totally know him. He's too big. You can't get the water in a shot glass. But we can truly know him. In his word, the Bible, God gives himself, even though he is incomparable, he makes himself known. And one of the ways is through comparisons. This is one of the things that has absolutely busted my brain this week. One of the ways that God shows us that he is incomparable is by making comparisons. What? But remember what he said in Isaiah chapter 40. The whole of the earth's water can fit in the palm of his hand. Now, does God have a hand? No. But he's making comparisons to show you that he's incomparable. He says the whole width of the span of the world can fit in the span of his fingers. Does God have fingers? No, but he's making incomparable things known to you by making comparisons. He can put the weight of the mountains into his scales. Does God have a set of scales? No. But he is making incomparable things known by making comparisons. Do you see his point? You'll never totally know him, but God has communicated to us creatures in ways that we can compute. And one of the big ways in the Bible is he makes comparisons to show us he's incomparable. But the big thing we want to see in this little series in the run-up to Christmas is that he's not just done it by making comparisons for us in his words, but he's done it through the incarnation of his Son. I'm not a massive fan of Christmas, but this is where we are getting as close to Christmassy as we're going to get this year, I think. We're talking about the incarnation. Now, that might be a word that you've never heard before, but in the middle of that word is probably something that you have eaten before. Anyone partial to a cheeky little chili con carne? Anyone like that? What does chili con carne mean? Chili means chili, con means with, carne means meat. Chili con carne is chili with meat. I was once in the Greasy Spoon Cafe in London, and up on the kind of chalkboard where the menu was, it said vegetarian chili con carne. That doesn't make sense, right? Vegetarian chili with meat. Irene's not going to eat that. That's not veggie. But that word carne is in the middle of incarnation. So to put it probably slightly more crudely than we should, the incarnation is God con carne. It is God with meat. It is God become flesh. It is the incomparable God become incarnate. The God who is beyond us has become like us. The Creator God who's incomparable becomes comparable to you so that he can be known by you. Now, here's a disclaimer at the start of this series. It's going to be really hard. It has hurt my head to try and wrestle with this stuff just to get this out in some kind of thing as a sermon today. But although it's going to feel like trying to get the ocean in a shot glass and trying to help ants understand the internet, we think this is worth our while because it's as we understand the bigness of God that we will be overwhelmed by the bigness of the gospel. That's what we want. To understand how big God is, and so to be overwhelmed by how big the true meaning of Christmas is. So what we're going to do the next 3 weeks is take one of the big, incomparable things about God and help us see how that makes us amazed by what he's done in the incarnation. You get where we're going? Incomparable incarnation. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah, all right. Shall we go with it? Here's the first thing we're going to learn about God this week. We're going to wrestle with the truth that God is eternal. Okay? And what I want to try and do is give us some kind of definition with some differences. Dealing first with that incomparable bit, then we'll get to incarnation, then we'll get to some implications. Right, God is eternal. What does that mean? Here's my attempt at a definition. That God is eternal means that he is limitless life, and so he is the Lord of time. He's limitless life. Now that means he has limits at neither end. He has neither beginning nor end. If you had a look back to Psalm 90 that Kirsten read us, it said, before the mountains were born, verse 2, and you brought forth the whole world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. So take the Pentland Hills over there. The Pentland Hills existed long before you were born. The Pentland Hills will exist long after you are dead. We use the phrase, don't we? Old as the hills. But in Psalm 90, Moses, the songwriter, takes us back older and before the hills. And he says, before the hills, God. From everlasting to everlasting, God. He is limitless life. The hills are bigger and older than us, but God is bigger and older than the hills. But that word older is not the right word to use about God. Think again, he's limitless life, which means although he's older than the hills, time has never wearied or aged him. He's limitless life. In Isaiah 40, verse 28, it says, the Lord's the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary. No beginning, no end, and in between no weariness or aging, just limitless life. Now, isn't that hard to try and get your head round? Because all I know are beginnings and end, weariness and aging. Let me tell you about my week. And this is going to sound like a really bad version of Craig David's 7 days. I felt rough as anything on Monday. I was asked to be involved in a funeral on Tuesday. I was reading about a new Alzheimer's drug on Wednesday. Keenan kept us up all night, so I was knackered on Thursday. I'd been a run the day before, so I was aching in pain on Friday. And we celebrated Keenan's first birthday with a party yesterday, and he's 1 today. Every day this week has been laden with the reality that I am languishing in limitations. Beginnings, ends, weariness, aging. We live in those bits of Psalm 90 that it says the best of our days are like trouble and sorrow. That's where we live in it. Whereas God, limitless life, lives in the bits of Psalm 90 that say 1,000 years in God's sight are like a day that's just gone by. Now, do you get why we're saying? He's incomparable. He's so big, he's so different to us. Now that means if he's limitless life, you'll never catch God on a bad day. He's never less than himself. He's limitless life. But that also means he's not just limitless life, he is the Lord of time. So he is not constrained or confined by time because he is the creator of time. He's the Lord of it. If you've ever tried reading the Bible from the start, you'll know that the first words on the first page of the Bible are where the eternal God sets tick-tock time, as it says, in the beginning, God. The one who had no beginning, limitless life, gives everything else its beginning. He's like the author who has written the story of history. He's created and crafted and is controlling the narrative. And get your head around this. As the God of limitless life, he knows the story's beginning, he knows the story's middle, and he knows the story's end. And as the Lord of time, he has the freedom to write himself into the story whenever he wants. Now, this is where it starts to hurt your brain. As the Lord of time, imagine time as a box. He both exists outside of time, but has also entered and engaged in time. Which means we live in a world where the eternal God relates to time, and everything we do reverberates out the box into eternity. Isn't it? This is trying to get oceans into a shot glass. This is an ant trying to understand the internet. I can't understand how that works. We experience time so differently to him. What's your experience of time? I am not Lord of it. It lords over me. People lie to you and say, time's a healer. It's not. Time's a stealer. I knew an old boy who never used to ask you what the time was. He'd always go, how's the enemy? You'd have to go, Alec, it's 3:30. It's an enemy. God is not limited by time. He's Lord over it. It's not his enemy. It's his ally. He's got purposes that run from beginning to end. He's got promises that he is bringing to fulfillment. He's got work that he is carrying to completion. And he is not a slave to time. Time serves him. Which means the future will never catch God by surprise. He's never at a loss for time. He's Lord of time. Now, this is where we need to screw the nut and make sure that our minds are engaged. We need to listen carefully to this next sentence. Everything that we have just said about the eternal God is true about the Son of God. Everything we've just said about the eternal God is true about the Son of God. Listen to these verses from the Bible where it's either Jesus talking about himself or other people talking about him. This is John chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word. Speaking of Jesus. The Word was with God and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life. And that life was the light of all mankind. You see what's said about Jesus? Was with God, was God, in the beginning, limitless life that gives life to everyone. You see? Here's John chapter 8. Some guys say to Jesus, Jesus, you're not yet 50 years old, and you say you've seen Abraham. Jesus answered, truly I tell you, before Abraham was born, I am. Jesus is saying that before Abraham, who lived probably 1700 years before Jesus, Jesus was. I am. Listen to John 17. Jesus is praying to his Father. Father, glorify me in your presence with the glory I had with you before the world began. Eternal glory. Listen to what Paul says about Jesus. Colossians 1:17. Jesus is before all things, and in him all things hold together. What's that telling you about Jesus? He is the creator and the controller. He is limitless life, and he is the Lord of time. What's John telling you about Jesus? What's Jesus telling you about himself? What's Paul telling you about Jesus? Jesus is the eternal Son of God, the God of limitless life, and the Lord of time. What does that tell you about Christmas? It ain't his birthday. It is not the beginning of his life. He is limitless life. We're going to see he is born, but it's not his beginning. He's the eternal Son of God. Just very quickly, this is one of the places where we significantly and seriously differ from Muslims, from Mormons, from Jehovah's Witnesses. Jesus is not just a prophet that we listen to. He is the eternal Son of God that we worship. Everything we've said of God is true of the Son of God. Incomparable. Now, incomparable. Everyone with me so far? Where we're going to try and get to now is incomparable to incarnation. And what I want to show you is that God is saying the bigness of the gospel, God's good news for us, that he is going to make understandable to people who are like a shot glass mind. He's going to make it comprehensible to people who are like an ant trying to understand the internet. He's making it bite-sized for our digestion. He is saying that the incomparable God has become incarnate. He's taken on flesh. And I do think this is one of the things that we need to get beyond this being an academic thing to a thing where we stand in awe. This is taking us beyond this just being teaching, I think, to being a preaching thing. It's something. Incomparable, incarnation. Let me read to you again from John 1. Listen to this. The Word became flesh, made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. The truth here, the eternal God has taken on flesh. And the reason he dwells among us is to show God's glory to us. He's making the unknowable knowable. Let me read you another one. This is Galatians chapter 4. But when the set time had fully come, God sent his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those under the law, that we might receive adoption to sonship. Again, it's hard to get your head around this. The eternal God had a set time. And the reason he's born as a woman, not born as a woman, wow. The reason he's born of a woman is so that we might be adopted and redeemed to be his children. He's not just making the unknowable knowable, he's making the irredeemable redeemable. He's making dying slaves eternal sons and daughters. I honestly don't know how you can get your head around that. I honestly struggle that I am not more overwhelmed by that. The eternal Son of God, who could hold the oceans of the world in the palm of his hand, now has the soft, wrinkled little hands of a newborn baby. The eternal Son of God, who could weigh the mountains on scales and who could measure the span of the universe in the span of his fingers, now weighs something like 7 pounds 10 ounces. The eternal Son of God, limitless life, Lord of time, willingly, lovingly, humbly takes on limits for us. And knows what it is to have a life lived under the cruel law of time for us. He's still limitless life. You see it. He still gives his life for others, and they live. But he now lives in our half of Psalm 90. His days are trouble and strife. His life flies away, and he ends his life with a moan. He's still Lord of time. You see that? He's still controlling the narrative. There's times where his mum wants him to show his glory, and he says, "Mum, it is not yet time." There's people who come to him and try and make him king, and he says, "It's not my time." There's people who come and try and kill him, and he says, "It's not my time." And even when he dies, he is the one who says, "No one takes my life from me. I lay it down on my own accord." He's still Lord of time. And yet, he gets tired at the end of a long day. And he gets hungry in the length of time between meals. Incomparable incarnation. And we kind of want to do this just to make you go and marvel at this mystery. In some ways, we're going to get to implications, but in some ways, I'd rather we just marveled at it. What do you do with the crown jewels? You just look at them. It's not mine to wear, it's just mine to marvel at. That the incomparable God would become incarnate to reveal God's eternal glory and to make you his eternal sons and daughters. Now, we need to do the implication stuff. And I've got 7 things. I know we're probably all going 7 things near the end of a sermon, but you cannot complain about time when you're doing a sermon on eternity. Okay? So, in your readings on the back of the sheet this week, and in the Bible studies on Tuesday, we're going to work through 7 implications of eternity in our lives. And I'm going to do them really quickly. Let me give you number 1. They all end, by the way, because they're on eternity. One of them is eternity, but they all end with an E. Eternity. Here's the first one. Mortality. We need to confront the reality of our own mortality. One day, you and I will die. We're like grass. We're here the one day, and then we're gone the next. Now, we spend our lives trying to distract ourselves and numb ourselves from the reality of death. But as significant as the performance of your life is your preparedness for death. This is one of the reasons why I'm praying for a church building that is surrounded by a graveyard. That's my dream. Because every time you walk into church, you are reminded that this might be your last time. And as you walk past the graves of people who are died, you are walking into a building to hear of a person who died yet rose. But we need to face up to our own mortality. Christmas is agony for that, isn't it? People who will not be at the table. But although it's agony, it's also actually helpful. We'll never truly live until we have faced up to death. We need to face up to our mortality. But second thing, eternity. Our days are like grass. We live in these seasons of life, like Ecclesiastes chapter 3 tells us. We are like here one, but gone the next. But God says He has placed eternity in the hearts of humanity. It's one of the reasons that we can try and fill our lives up with stuff, and we try that at Christmas, don't we? But perishable products and fleeting feelings will never fill up an eternal heart. And the Bible is saying that your eternal heart, even though your body will die, you will live forever somewhere. Mortality will meet eternity. You will meet your Maker. And what you've done in life will echo and reverberate for eternity. How you've responded to God's glory revealed in Jesus will determine where you spend forever. Whether or not you've been redeemed by Jesus will determine whether or not your forever is slavery to fear or the freedom of limitless life. Can you say today where you're going to spend eternity? Third thing, humility. Eternity demands humility. Now, the Bible's got practical stuff on that. The Bible says, you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. You're like a mist. You're here and then you vanish. So why are you saying tomorrow I'll do this or that? No. You say, if the Lord wills. How about humility? Stop planning for Christmas. It might never come. But actually, the Bible's got more significant than that. Humility is bigger than what I will do with my time tomorrow. It's about what God has done in time for me. Humility goes, my life is a speck of dust in the span of history. My life is a vapor in the span of time. But my life is not just short and small. My life is full of sin. Which should give me the humility that goes, Psalm chapter 8. When I consider the heavens, what am I that God would be mindful of me? We should have a humility that goes, who am I in time that He would send His eternal Son to be born to die for me? It is a tragedy that I am not more overwhelmed by that. It is criminal that I am not more thankful for that. It is an embarrassment that I am so half-hearted in my worship, and it is a sorry state of affairs that I am still so full of myself. Humility. Fourth, another implication, envy. We waste so much of our life envying what other people have in life. Christmas is particularly bad for that. But the eternity of God in the Bible tells you to weigh the matters of time in the balances of eternity. If you want a Bible passage to read later, go and read Psalm 73. It's a psalm of comparisons. It's a guy who's tempted to envy people who are doing well in the world. But God says, do not judge people by their earthly bounty. Judge people by their eternal destiny. Stuff in this world is like a dream that vanishes when you wake up in eternity. Whereas God is your portion who will last forever. And it's better to have empty hands and an eternal God than full hands and an eternity full of terror. Be careful who you envy. Fifth, vanity. I think it's and I've wrestled with this. If life is eternity, if that's all that matters, what's the point of life? Meaningless, meaningless. Everything's meaningless. But I hope you noticed when Kirsten read Psalm 90, how it ended. It's a psalm about everlasting God, everlasting God. We're stuck in the middle, so brief, and yet the last verse is like this kind of gasp of exasperation. Verse 17. May the favor of the Lord our God rest on us. Establish the work of our hands for us. Yes, and he says it again, establish the work of our hands. The eternal God can establish eternal things from your hands. He can do eternal things through you. The point, I think, is if his favor rests on you, what you do runs into eternity. It's got to be our prayer, isn't it? As we approach Christmas. God, make it not just about giving perishable tat to people, but having eternal impact on people. It's something important to teach to our kids at Christmas. Sixth, related, treasury. Where's the treasury that you're trying to fill things full of? Jesus says in Matthew chapter 6, you've got two options. You can fill up a treasury on earth where moths can eat it, thieves can steal it, and rust can destroy it. Or you can store up a treasury full of things where moths, rust, and thieves are nowhere. He says you have a Father in heaven, an eternal God, who loves to lavish eternal rewards on his redeemed children. And so he says, give to the needy just because they're needy, and pray to your Father just because he's worthy, and fast from food just for the eyes of him who sees what's done in secrecy. And if you do, he will lavish up rewards for you in eternity. Where your treasury is reveals whether or not your heart believes that God is eternal. Last thing, and this was me scrabbling around for another thing ending in E, but I think it's an important one. Energy. From Psalm 90 we said, life is weariness and sorrow. Isaiah chapter 40 goes on to say, even young lads stumble and fall and grow tired and weary. Now, we don't really need to be taught that. We know that. Some of us have suffered for a long time. But what Isaiah 40 tells you is that the eternity of God is energy for your exhaustion. Let me finish just by reading these verses from Isaiah 40. The Lord's the everlasting God, creator of the ends of the earth. He won't grow tired or weary. His understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary. He increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, young men stumble and fall. But those who, and the word here is, wait on the Lord, will renew their strength. They'll run and not grow weary. They'll walk and not be faint. You see what he's saying? The eternal God gives his limitless life to those who are weary. But what do you have to do? Wait for him. What are we rubbish at doing in a world of limited time? Waiting. Because it feels like a waste. But God says, wait on me and I will give you the energy for your exhaustion, the strength for your suffering. The test case is going to be Jesus. Is this all nonsense or does it fly? Jesus, fairly young man, stumbles and falls into the claims of death, and from a tomb waits on God. The question is, Isaiah 40, will he rise on wings like eagles? And on the third day, he rose. The eternal life of God is energy for your weary life now, and it is a hope of everlasting life, even beyond death. Jesus rose. Hallelujah.